Okay. So if you can beg my indulgence here for just a second, a friend of mine came tonight and she was a little bit late. She has 60 days today, and I'd like to give her her chip if you guys don't mind. So Deanna. All right, now that that's out of the way, our guest speaker tonight, our main speaker, is Becca. Will you please welcome Becca?
Hi, guys. Are you enthusiastic? Yay! Congratulations on, and I want that outfit too, you know. Okay, you guys, I'm Becca, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 18th, 2012. So I'm young, like you guys. Young in spirit, old in body. I wanted to, and my home group is Park Avenue. My sponsor's not here, but she always has me do certain things if I speak, like wear a dress. And if she showed up tonight, I was going to tell her this is a very short dress. So, anyway, my home group's Park Avenue, Tuesday, Thursday at Trinity Presbyterian, and my sponsor is Gabby V. I want to thank Kirk. Thank you, Kirk, for asking me. I'm humbled and grateful and freaked out and scared. So, but I have a bunch of really friendly faces out there, so I know it'll work out well. Congratulations to Doug, Ivory, Michael, and James for coming up and getting a chip today. I think that's really awesome. Okay, so today, why did you ask me here? To talk about sobriety and to talk about what happened, what I was like before I got sober, what brought me into these rooms, and what it's like now, and share my experience, strength, and hope with you guys, because this is important stuff. This is the only way I stay sober, is by hearing your guys' story, and sponsoring and working with the sponsor, actively working with the sponsor. Every week I talk to my sponsor. I need that. It's really important. So what it was like, I was a late bloomer. I have no stories about being drunk. I think the first time I got drunk, I was high school graduation. It just, nothing exciting until 1991. But there were a lot of things that led me to being an alcoholic. There's alcoholism on both sides of my family, my mom's side, my dad's side. I am the third oldest of 10 kids, and my mom had, in 3 years and 1 month, she had 5 kids, 2 sets of twins and a single. And when she had the single, she was in the hospital. Back then, you go to the hospital and you stay for a while. And then my dad went to work, and at age 8, they left me home with 5 kids, 4 of whom were in diapers, to take care of. So I had this emphasized sense of responsibility that came from growing up in that family. And so I figured that I would just bring that into adulthood, and I would, boss all my family around, because that was what I was really good at. Telling them how to live their lives. I didn't do so well with life. I always wanted to be, my goals in life were to be a mother, and a good mother, and a good wife. And so to do that, I decided it would be really smart to marry a guy 30 years older than I was who had had a vasectomy. It's like, that's what you do when you're in your 20s and stupid. But we were married 30 years. Anyway, but when I started dating him, I remember he came over to my house, and I had cooking sherry in my cupboard. That's all I had. But he was a daily drinker, and I became a daily drinker, and it was pretty controlled for a long time. I had a career at the phone company. We had our own business for a long time, and I sort of kept things under control. In '91, my dad died, and to decide what to do with my dad before he died, he had Alzheimer's, and so my mom decided it would be a good idea for me to find a place for him. And in Arizona back in '91, well, it was '90 when we found the place, there was only one Alzheimer's bed in the whole state that was a locked facility. He kept running away from, I mean, it was not a good scene, and so we got him a place down in Phoenix, and from that was a turning point of me becoming more of the caretaker for my parents than I was. I didn't have kids, so that worked out well, to just be that reliable person to take care of things in the family. He died in '91, and that responsibility stepped up. And then in 2001, my mom died, and that really stepped up because there was a trust, and I was responsible for making sure all my siblings got what was in the trust. And it was a long process. It took years to get that done. In the meantime, I noticed in retrospect that in '91 my drinking started really accelerating. I had, we lived in San Diego, but I had a small place here that I would come to take care of my mom's business, and then I would drink and drink and drink. And then when I would go home, I would drink and drink and drink in San Diego. And then when my mom got sick, it got worse. It was, I was a wine drinker for a long time, and then became a bourbon drinker, bourbon on the rocks. And I kept thinking that I had to stay in control. And I realized that, I mean, my brother-in-law, I would tell my siblings how to raise their kids. I had no kids. I was telling them how to raise their kids. I was telling them how to live their lives. I was telling them how to take care of their husbands and what they should and shouldn't do. And it wasn't working out well. So when I moved back here in 2003, and decided that what I really needed was to go to Al-Anon, because I have now, by this time, at least 4 siblings who are alcoholics, and that it was my job to get them sober. So I went. People that knew me didn't ever see me drunk. I lived by myself, and I didn't manifest that appearance in my everyday life. I was very controlled. I had everybody fooled, including myself. And in 8 years of going to Al-Anon, it finally occurred to me one night. Of course, I never finished the 4th step in Al-Anon, because, my God, then I'd have to look at myself, and I didn't want to do that because I was looking at all my siblings and trying to figure out how to get them sober. And so 8 years in Al-Anon, and my drinking was just progressing. I was starting earlier in the day. I was quitting later at night, and I was actually working in a volunteer work in the recovery community. And I just realized one night I was an alcoholic, and I had 3 really good friends who were alcoholics. I couldn't understand. They all had something I wanted, and I didn't understand it. And it was because they were in program, they were working the steps, and they were sober. And so I called them like 11 o'clock at night, and all 3 of them either called me back or answered the phone. And they, just kept saying, "I can't believe it, I'm a fucking alcoholic. I'm a fucking alcoholic." And that's all. I mean, later, my neighbor talk to the other neighbor, and I heard Becca the other night, and she's yelling out there saying she's a fucking alcoholic. What's going on? Well, that was probably the same night I was out there dancing to Lady Gaga in the driveway at midnight. My neighbors probably knew before I did, but anyway, and so that night I realized I needed to get sober. I needed to look at myself because my life was not getting any better. I was still obsessed with my siblings, and it was the first day of really starting to look at myself, starting to realize that I was an alcoholic and that I didn't want to do that anymore. So that was the first step for me. And from that time, I've been blessed. I haven't had to go out. I had my last drink that night, and what's so incredible is, like 4 days later, I was going to Denver to celebrate a niece who was graduating, and I was in our little apartment with my sisters with frozen vodka in the freezer and watching her pour the vodka. And I found out later all my alcoholic friends said, she's not going to last. She's not going to last through this party. And I knew I had to. I knew I had to do this, because if I gave myself that permission, I'll just wait till, and my birthday, it was like, don't ever get sober before your birthday. But that's what I did, and I was able to stay sober. So now I'm going to talk about what it's like now. I have to say that I've been able to go through some incredible things in my life during since 2012. In 2016, I was diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer, which is a particularly deadly strain. It hits young women, obese women, African women, and women like Angelina Jolie with the BRCA gene, and I don't have the Angelina Jolie BRCA gene. I'd like to look like Angelina Jolie, but that's... And I was 62 years old. No, I was 66 years old when this happened. And I looked at the doctor, I said, I don't get this. And she said, you're just lucky. You won the lottery. So I went through that, and I stayed sober. I went through 7 months of chemo. I stayed sober. During that 7 months of chemo, I broke up with a sober boyfriend, and I stayed sober. I had to move. I stayed sober. And so I was able to draw on experience, strength, and hope, and have all of my sponsees, my sponsor, my sober girlfriends really helped get me through all of that. And yet life goes on. And so I thought, well, if I get through that, I can get through anything. And this last year's been a particularly difficult one for me. My sister, she was 65, 66 last year. She died on April 14th of last year from this disease. And in 2017, a younger brother who had colon cancer, and he's an alcoholic and had all these operations, wouldn't quit drinking. He's in the ICU down in the valley, detoxing. He had a spleen bleed, and I went to see him today, and he knew who I was, but he's really, they pumped in 16 units of blood into him last week, 3 operations in 24 hours. And the sad thing, it's a direct result of his lifestyle, of his drinking a lot of drugs when he was younger, but now it's just drinking pot and cigarettes. And I can go through that. I went through that. I was his medical power of attorney in charge of his trust. And it's like, I don't think I can do this. But I had to do it. My parents said that's what I needed to do. And I hadn't done my Al-Anon program enough to say, okay, enough. Yeah, that's what God should have gone right in the head. Enough of this. This is enough, Becca. This is you can only do what you can do, and to be there and love and support my brother through what he's going through now. I also have a lot of family issues. That there are 9 of us left, and 8 of us live in Prescott, and 1 lives in Flagstaff. And we had this family business thing, and it just has torn the family apart in the last, it's gone on for about 9 months, and it's over now. But I had to get through that. I really had to just buckle down. But during this last year, I lost my joy. I had no joy at all in my life, and I just kept saying, I need to get my enthusiasm back. I need to get my joy back. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, what gives me joy? I live alone. I have a 17-year-old cat who has dementia. I have family members who are alcoholic, and I just can't figure it out. And one day I was listening to the radio, and they were having a diner special, and I got my joy back because they said it was a special on frittatas. And frittatas is a really funny word. It just makes me smile. It's sort of frittata. And it reminds me of tatas that I don't have anymore. So it's all good. And I thought to myself, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get that joy back? Is this the way it's going to be the rest of my life? And why won't my demented cat die? All of these things are going through my head. So I started thinking about the word joy, and I did what I thought. I swore I'd never do this, and that's look things up on the internet that says, do you know that joy is only listed 5 times in the first 164 pages? 5 times. And I found that interesting. Some of it was this one I like, like the page 17 where it talks about the sinking ship, and when we first get into AA, that we're on this sinking ship, but we're all going to survive it. We're all going to survive it. And anyway, so I came up with the joy thing. I got to look at my notes here, and started realizing that that I had to actively work on what does that mean to me. I had to work with my sponsor. I've talked to my sponsees. How do I get this joy back? You know, I'm 70 years old, and, you know, that comes with its own set of problems. But I'm alive, I have a good attitude, and I want my joy back. I started thinking about what was triggering me to lose my joy, and I started realizing that when I talk about politics, I lose my joy. When I talk about with family members, the things that are going on in our family, I start losing my joy. When I talk about my brother and what he's going through, I start losing my joy, and I start thinking about the sadness of losing a sister last year. And this sister, this was tragic for me on her deathbed. She hadn't talked to me. She lived in Mesa, and she hadn't talked to me in, 6 or 7 years. She had pancreatitis from drinking at one point in 2002. She was in the hospital down in the valley, so I went to visit her, and of course I had to tell the nurses that she was an alcoholic, because that's what I do, is tell on everybody, and you need to fix her. And but I guess they couldn't figure it out. Hello, they know what's going on. So she thinks that I called AA and told them to go visit her. And she's hated me. She hated me for all those years. When I got the breast cancer, and I was very, very sick, and talked to some of my sisters. I said, I'd really like to talk to Susie. Do you think you can get her to call me? And so she called me. I got to talk to her twice. But the last thing she said to me over the phone while I was sick was, how much longer do I have to be nice to you? And that is the type of, yes, that hurts to the core. And on her deathbed, in front of the whole family, she looked at me and said, shame on you. My family doesn't like it that I'm sober. They don't like it. They don't think I'm an alcoholic. They think I just like joining groups. That's what it is. That's really what I like to do. And so but that's okay, you know, and I got through that okay. The hurt's still there. The wonderful knowledge is that she's in a place now that she can look down and she sees what's going on, and she sees my heart, she sees my soul. And yes, I should not have told the nurses she was an alcoholic, like they didn't know already, but I didn't call AA on her. I really didn't. She knows that now. She knows that now. So I decided that all of these things that were taking my joy away had to do with other people, had to do with my cat, another thing, my family, other things, politics, other things. It all had to do with other things. Had nothing to do with them. They weren't doing anything to me. It was me. I had to look at myself. And so then I had to look up acceptance. And I liked the definitions I got. They actually had acceptance for kids, but it was way too highbrow for us. So I went with just the regular acceptance. The definition I like the most is the third definition, actually. I'll talk about agreement with or belief in an idea, opinion, or explanation. And I thought about that night that I decided I was an alcoholic and I needed to get sober. That was, I went to an agreement that I was an alcoholic. I went to that agreement, and that's the first step. My life is out of control, and I need help, and I need help. And I knew where to get it. I was lucky I knew where to get it. The second definition is the action of consenting to receive or undertake something offered. And my alcoholic friends that night said to me, very calmly, I mean, they didn't buy into my screaming and my swearing and crying at all. They just said, so Becca, what are you going to do about it? You're an alcoholic. What are you going to do about it? And that, of course, that elicited much more swearing and crying at the time. But this was the action of consenting to receive or undertake something offered. AA was offered to me. They knew that I knew what I needed to do about it, and that's what I did. I went to meetings immediately. The next day, I got a temporary sponsor, and I didn't quite know how it works, so I would say to my temporary sponsor, I said, I'm going out of town. It's going to be tough because there's going to be a lot of drinking, celebrating. I said, could you call me? And she just looked at me and she said, Becca, that's not how it works. You call me. I don't call you. Oh, okay. I guess I have to be the one. And that's the good thing, that I had to want this. And she's not my servant. She's there to help me if I want it, and she's ready to give it to me. So I did that. I did other things. At the beginning of my sobriety, I'd go to meetings, and people would, like they'd have the chips, which I didn't quite understand at the time. And so people would be, holding them and passing them along. And twice, different people passed me a chip. I just burst into tears, and I looked at the chip and I thought, oh my God, they gave me their chip. I love it. And I'd walk out. And it happened again. It happened again. And I did the same thing. Put it in my pocket. And at the end of the meeting, somebody said, that 2-month chip is missing. Did anybody, lose the 2-month chip. What happened? And oh my God, I'm stealing chips. I can't even do. So anyway, the last definition of acceptance is the action or process of being received as adequate or suitable, typically to be admitted into a group. Oh my God, that's exactly being admitted into a group. And that's what AA did for me. They embraced me. They helped me. The people in the rooms reached out to me, kept me. And one of the first guys that I was going to this meeting, and it was filled with men, young men, and I'm this old lady, and I'm sitting it's like I don't know what's going on, and I thought it was a men's meeting at first, and at the time I wasn't a cougar, so I thought maybe I should leave, and so I asked the guy leading. I said, "Is this a men's meeting? Young men's meeting?" No, stay. And I couldn't even say I was an alcoholic. I just said, "I'm here." I'm crying. And the next meeting, I was there still crying. I could say I was an alcoholic, but the guy running the meeting has a year more than I do, and he reached out to me and gave me numbers of women in this program to help me get through what I was going through. And so this was wonderful that I was able to have that acceptance by AA. I accepted my alcoholism, and you guys accepted me. And then I looked at synonyms. And one of the things it said is willingness to tolerate a difficult or unpleasant situation. And I'm like, that's what's happening to my joy. I don't want to tolerate a difficult or unacceptable situation. I want to try to fix it. I want to try to tell people why I'm right. I mean, my brother-in-law got me business cards in the 90s that said, "I am Queen Rebecca, and your problems are my business." Because that was me. And with all of this drama that's been happening with my family, and going through this frustration of a lot of resentments coming up, and I'm realizing I started slipping back into that, I'm right, you're wrong, and you need to listen to me. And that's not my business anymore. And I need to be able to be that person that can listen to the chatter and sort of go, talk to the hand. Oh, you guys are too young to know what that means. The older ones know. And I really think that that if I come up here and I talk about what's happening, what happened a year ago or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it's not as effective of what's going on right now in my life, and how do I apply these principles to my life so that I make today better. I have to make today better, or I can't pass this on to anybody. And I've got one of my sponsees here today, and she's been so polite and so loving to me over the last year that this has been going on. And the wonderful part is that she sees me as I'm just another drunk on the bus. I'm just trying to stay sober, and that I'm not putting myself as some paragon that I've got it because I've got 7 years sober. I don't have it. I have to work at it. It's only there as long as I keep working at it. So I'm really glad to be here. And I have something else, I think. Oh, this was very wise, something I wrote down. I didn't get this off the internet. I thought of it myself. Okay, so my lack of joy is directly proportional to my lack of acceptance of other people being who they are. Today, on my way down to Phoenix with my sister and her husband to see my brother, the chatter about people driving, the chatter about politics, the chatter about we got caught in a traffic jam and there were trucks on every side, and the anxiety, I'm just so anxious, what am I going to do? You know, and I'm just sitting in the back seat and I'm praying and I'm thinking, Becca, you're better. I'm better than I used to be. I used to be that person, and I don't need to be. And I did talk about the Electoral College, which was a big mistake. And it was so funny because we're right fighters. It's terrible in my family. So she's giving her opinion, I'm giving my opinion, and then I explained something, she's explained something, and she said, well, Becca, every time I say something, you have to come back with something. And I said, you're right. I said, that's okay. And then she went on to explain how she was right. And I thought, yeah, that would be me. I would continue doing that until we got really angry at each other, and that's no good. That's no good for anybody. So I have something I wanted to read. This whole talk was started in my mind, gelling. Actually, here's another good word, ponder. I was pondering what I was going to say today, and this little thought came in when I heard another friend of mine speak about acceptance a couple of days ago. And she read, of course, from page 417, and so I wanted to just share a little bit, because I know everybody reads 417. It says, and acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I'm disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be in this moment. That I have to remember that I have a higher power, and I want my higher power to boss everybody else out around so that I don't get pissed off. That's not the way it works. They have their own higher power and their own path, and I have to be, I got to get my ego out of it and be humble enough to just say, that's where they are. That's where they are, and I love them, no matter what. God damn it. No, okay. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy or joyous. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as to what needs to be changed in me and in my attitudes. And then this other line is, when I complain about me or about you, I'm complaining about God's handiwork. I'm saying that I know better than God, and I don't. And luckily, I found that out in these rooms. I'm really grateful. Thank you for listening to me, and frittata out there, people.
Keep it going for Becca. What do you think about that? All right. This has been a regular meeting of the Rotary Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are cordially invited to join us again next week. Please bring a friend. There are approximately 100 meetings of AA each week in the Prescott area. We advise that you attend as many as possible, and we hope that you will join us again soon. After the prayer, will the people who volunteered to do stuff do that stuff? And your court cards are on the back table. Circle up and say the prayer of Becca's choice.